on KPFK.
And joining us back here on Freedom Now is our regular correspondent for Syria and the region, Brother Johnny Achi with Arab Americans for Syria. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Sister Sage. Good morning to you and all to your listeners.
Brother Johnny, we do want to ask you for updates on Syria, but we want to get started first with your analysis on the region. Given that the United Snakes just assassinated Iran's second-in-command, General Qasem Soleimani, near Baghdad International Airport in Iraq.
It's been a little while since we've been on the show. As you know, we used to come on the show almost weekly, and the topic was always Syria, and it would be Syria as well today. But like you said, there's a bigger event that took place in the last couple of days, mainly the assassination of the leader of the Quds militia from Iran, General Qasem Soleimani, who's a big commander. He is actually most powerful military leader in the Middle East, I believe, and his assassination in most of Baghdad and most of Iraq is a real disaster, in my opinion, to world peace. So for someone who is claiming to want to end this war outside, as you know, Mr. Trump, 2020 resolution was a bit different. He began 2020 with a bang by authorizing more U.S. combat troops to the Middle East after the Monday's attack on Iraq Popular Mobilization Forces. Now, that attack that took place, which, by the way, the PMF, Popular Mobilization Forces, are part of the Iraq military. That attack killed 27 of them, and a couple of them were generals, and wounded many others. So that attack that was justified, they were saying in response to an attack in Kirkuk that killed one U.S. contractors, there is no presence for the PMF in Kirkuk. The PMF has not been attacking no one but ISIS. The PMF in the last 2 years have won the war on ISIS. They preliminarily freed the Anbar all the way to the Syrian borders, even entered into Syria and helped the Syrian army clear the area where ISIS was most concentrated on the border of Iraq and Syria, which they were pretty much safe haven for them for over the past 2 years prior to this. So it's very surprising, rather shocking, to see that U.S. attack and killing 27 PMF, which is something not been part of any argument or wars or fights between the U.S. and the PMF. On the contrary, if you want to consider the U.S. actually in a war against ISIS, which I always refuted, and we've talked about that many, many times, I think the U.S. military complex is in bed with ISIS, and I proved it many, many times on your show. But to me, that's another proof. You're actually going and avenging the fall of ISIS by attacking the PMF and turning the war now into the people who have fought ISIS for so long. Then, of course, Thursday's assassination of Soleimani with 7 of his commanders, again, including the deputy chief of the PMF. So with him was the deputy chief of the PMF, who was assassinated as him, and 7 more comrades. This is a part of continuous U.S. wars on aggression that is endless. We need to understand that, if I may remind the listeners who also, General Soleimani, for the U.S. who never heard the name or probably don't know him, in Syria, right from Iraq, in Syria, he had played a huge role, in Syria at least, in helping the Syrian army defeat Al-Qaeda, ISIS, in Aleppo in 2016. And by doing that, we saved 3 million civilians in Aleppo. So while the world was screaming, "You're burning Aleppo," after the Syrian army was able to evacuate all the civilians, it was with the help of the Quds forces, headed by General Qasem Soleimani, that we were able to free Aleppo. So yes, they played a huge role not only in defeating ISIS in Iraq, which they continue to have the presence, but also when needed in Syria, they were there. And his tremendous contribution to the war against terror will never be forgotten. Just to let you know, who is this man? Now, of course, being the commander of Quds forces, he had also have a lot of contribution in aiding Palestinian resistance forces, and he has got a lot of credit for their ability to resist the occupier in Gaza and different places in the West Bank. But in the meantime, for the last 2-3 years, his role has been primarily defeating ISIS in Baghdad and in Iraq and in Syria. The reason I stress this, because we need to understand, if the U.S. wants free Baghdad or free Iraq of ISIS, you do not go and attack the PMF, which is the main forces for defeating of ISIS. That's just my main point. You cannot be defeating the enemy of your enemy or striking the enemy of your enemy. That just doesn't make sense. This is the U.S. involvement in Syria from day one has been the same logic. I've been on your show since 2012, I think, early 2012, and we've talked many times how it's so contradicting the U.S. policy in the Middle East. Does not make any sense. And if you step back a little bit and you view it, you would know that the U.S. is the one who helped and aided ISIS into growing into the monster they have become. Some of you listening maybe never heard me or haven't heard me in a while. That has been my position from day one. When Obama ordered the U.S. involvement in Syria, primarily to defeat ISIS after they built us, after they made ISIS so strong. ISIS just appeared on the surface in 2013 out of thin air. The logistics to keep 40, 50, 80,000 fighters, just the logistics require superpowers. The U.S. knows, because U.S. logistics takes billions of dollars every month or every year to aid, for example, the U.S. presence in Iraq. Back in 2003, when the U.S. occupied Iraq, they tell you that was part of the major expense is logistics, food, fuel, medical help. So ISIS to get that logistic help was not something that could be done just overnight. So we know who, and they were driving armored American weaponry, Toyotas, 400s. I mean, all the help they got, petrodollars from Saudi and Qatar. Of course, Saudi and Qatar don't do anything without the help and actually orders from the U.S. But beside the point, the U.S. decided to enter Syria or attack Syria from air, supposedly attacking ISIS. I'm going to tell you what happened between 2013 and 2014. ISIS grew 10 times fold. Since Obama said it's going to take us 10 to 15 years and many billions of dollars to defeat this monster, ISIS grew tenfold in that time. ISIS took, instead of 20% of the Syrian land, to almost 60% of the Syrian land. And Syria could not advance against ISIS because every time they advance, they get bombed by U.S. and U.S. would say, sorry, it was collateral damage, unintentional. So they killed more Syrian civilians and more Syrian military and Syrian armament than they actually killed ISIS. Finally, the Syrian government saw what was happening and asked the help of the Russians. The Russians entered in August 2014, and less than a month, half of ISIS logistics were defeated. Dozens and dozens of oil that was stolen from Syria that was sold to Turkey with the help of the U.S. was immediately dismantled. Because you got the air view in Syria and many part of it, it's a desert. So how could you, with the biggest U.S. military ability in the world, cannot defeat some people that move in very clearly on track? So when the Russians played a big role in stopping ISIS advancement, that's when the Syrian army started liberating back more Syrian land. At the time, the U.S. was claiming that Syria was killing people. Now it's very clear to the whole world Syria was defeating an army of mercenaries that was sent to us by the West and by reactionary regimes in the Middle East. Over 150,000 terrorists were killed in Syria. Unfortunately, also 100,000 Syrian army men either killed or injured in this war. We paid a very heavy price. That Syrian army is made of all Syrians. It's mandatory to serve in the Syrian army. So when you have 100,000 Syrian army men killed, that tells you how much sacrifice the Syrian people have made in this war, this regime change war on Syria. So it will become another day of discussions, the Syrian topic. What I want to talk briefly before I move to general finish of Soleimani, finish the Syrian topic. The Syrians have pretty much liberated almost 14 out of 16 provinces. Life could not have been better than this year than it's ever been in the last 8 years. Christmas was celebrated across all 14 provinces. In Aleppo, which was banned from celebrating Christmas just 3 years ago, today it's living its best days. Hundreds of thousands were in the streets. The images were amazing. From eastern Aleppo, that was just under terrorist occupation just 3 years ago, when the world was crying foul for the Syrian army to go in and recapture it or liberate it. The people are back, rebuilding, living in peace. Very uncommon mortar bombs every now and then, maybe once a month, I would say, that will just silence that peace for a day or two. The terrorists are still in the northern outskirts, which is closer to the Idlib region, that they can still reach Aleppo with mortar bombs or with rockets. But other than that, it's very peaceful. Now, Idlib is the last province. As you know, for the last 5 years, Sister Page, the Syrian army did not enter an area before they negotiated with the terrorists to avoid the lives of civilians. In Ghouta, eastern Ghouta, and in Damascus, we lived under the mercy of these terrorist groups for 5 years before the government finally negotiated for them to take exit to Idlib. Syria Damascus took over 11,000 mortar bombs in those 5 years. And there was a big blame on the Syrian government army for not entering Ghouta sooner to protect 5 million people in Damascus. And the government always said, there's too many civilians in Ghouta. We cannot go in. It will be catastrophic. So we suffered for 5 years on mortar bombs, over 1,600 killed and over 10,000 injured by these mortar bombs that were randomly launched on civilian population that was otherwise living their normal life, going to work, going to school, and these mortar bombs just falling randomly. Imagine that for 5 years. Damascus never seen any wars, any fights, because the terrorists could not invade it, but they got as close as to even Ghouta, which is only 5 kilometers away, and they were able to launch those mortar bombs. So even in eastern Ghouta, even to protect the capital of the country, the Syrian army did not enter eastern Ghouta until they were able to relieve all the civilians and send all these fighters in air-conditioned bus, say the least, to Idlib. Same thing in Aleppo. They negotiated, whoever wanted to negotiate, to Idlib. Same thing in Palmyra. Same thing in different areas of Syria. There was always a negotiation team before the attack took place for maybe months, sometimes years. So Idlib became the safe haven of over 100,000 mercenaries from all over the world. You cannot imagine the language and the dialect in this Idlib. Idlib would normally only have less than 700 to 800,000 Syrian, maybe 1 million. It's probably best days before this conflict. Now, all these people have been replaced by about 100 to 200,000 civilians, and the rest are all fighters and mujahideen and mercenaries from all over the world. So when we hear people, and some on Washington Post, I think, or I don't know which one I read, 3 million people under attack. There's no 3 million people in Idlib. The whole Syrian population is 20 million, 5 million in Aleppo, 5 million in Damascus, and the rest of 10 million is divided over 14 other provinces. Idlib is not the biggest one of them by far.
We just want to remind our listening audience that we are speaking with Brother Johnny Achi with Arab Americans for Syria, speaking on Syria and the region.
So, they're doing the same thing. Now the media propaganda about the Syrian army wanting to enter Idlib, the same thing they did in Aleppo, the same thing they did in Ghouta, the same thing they did in Palmyra and Homs, and all these cities that Syrian army liberated with minimal casualty. They always cry out, trying to get another intervention or a pretext for intervention against the Syrian army. That has failed. The world already agrees and admits Syrian army, with the Syrian people united, defeated the U.S. proxy war on Syria with all these terrorists that they send us and Muslims from all over the world. And soon enough, they'll be all sent back to where they come from, believe it or not. I just read an article that Turkey, because Turkey is the one entered them into Syria. Turkey, of course, is a NATO member and a puppet for the U.S. for a long, long time, dramatically entering all these tens of thousands of mujahideen into Syria. Now they have to send them back because actually they're sending some of them to Libya. So now Syria has made that fun decision. We are now time to enter Idlib, the final occupied terrorist province in Syria, which is bordering Turkey. And we're making a solid move, solid ground. And if the world would just listen to what is happening on the ground instead of to the propaganda piece. I want to remind the listeners that Mr. Trump just claimed a huge victory for, I will have to say, quote unquote, assassination of al-Baghdadi, the ISIS leader, in Idlib. Al-Baghdadi, who had been present in Iraq and then in Syria, in the eastern part of Syria, in Raqqa, mostly last known whereabouts, suddenly shows up in Idlib, which is, I would say, 600 kilometers away from the further east point to the further west point, or maybe 300, 400 kilometers. He could not have crossed those 300, 400 kilometers unless he went into Turkey. So Turkey helped him escape from Raqqa to go into Idlib. And then here the U.S. assassinate him in Idlib. So it's okay for the U.S. to bomb and admit that it's a stronghold of ISIS and kill al-Baghdadi and take pictures with the dogs involved in the assassination of Baghdadi in Syrian territory, but it's not okay for the Syrian army to liberate the Syrian people under other 100,000 or so fighters. So by killing al-Baghdadi, you do not end the war, my friend. You did not even claim victory. Because for all we know, that when the U.S. attack or kill one of its major enemies, they post pictures. We've seen him do it with Saddam Hussein over and over and over again. With Libya, Muammar Gaddafi. They were not embarrassed of showing pictures over and over and over again. But for bin Laden and for al-Baghdadi, their mysterious death, we will never know because it was such a secret operation. Now, I'm not saying that they're alive. They were killed somehow, somewhere, maybe by U.S., maybe by others. The point is, their role was over. It's not so heroic to appoint someone to a position and then take him down. It's not so heroic to take credit for a war you didn't fight. What's heroic is for the people on the ground that have bled for the last 8 years, civilians and army men, to liberate Syria and to return back to 2010 when Syria was one of the most peaceful countries in the world. So that's regarding Idlib, and again, we are making major ground moves. The U.S. has asked Turkey to enter, so Turkey now is an occupying force in Syria again. They physically entered Syria. Now remember, the Muslim Brotherhood government of Erdogan is not all Turkey. Turkey, a lot of parties of Turkey, popular parties, socialist parties, have come to Syria many times and sat down with President Assad and told him, we are against everything that Erdogan is doing in Syria. So we're not against the Turkish people. We've been neighbors for so long. But Erdogan has left no friends around him. His policy and his doing everything the U.S. is asking him to do has ruined all relationship with him and his neighbors. He has no friends, period, right now. So Turkey, its army, is not too much in favor of anything Erdogan is asking him to do. That is why, because remember, Turkey's army is a little bit ideological. He's not Muslim Brotherhood. They don't care for Erdogan or the prime minister's political affiliation or religious affiliation. But so what is Erdogan is using Syrian and mercenaries that have been trained in Turkey for so long. So yes, he's entering under Turkish flag, but most of these fighters are not real brigades from the Turkish army. Just to make that clear, that Turkey army is not at war with Syria, and that is why we're not at full-scale war with Turkey, but rather with the occupying forces that mostly are either Syrians or other mercenaries that have been trained in Turkey for the last few years, and now they're sent back to fight back the advancement of the Syrian army to liberate its own territory.
We are speaking with Brother Johnny Achi with Arab Americans for Syria. And Brother Johnny, can we backtrack a little bit to expand on the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani and the effect that it has on the region in general?
So again, General Soleimani's role in Syria and Iraq was mainly defeating ISIS, and for the U.S. To take this huge, what I believe is a grave mistake and a grave escalation that will for sure ignite the fuse of a catastrophic war, at least in Iraq, if not the whole area of the Middle East, and perhaps the entire world. What Trump has done without thinking, of course, with the pressure from the industrial complex. I mean, you have to understand the deep state was not too happy with Trump the last 4 years of his, he's pulling troops out, talking about which stuff he talked about prior to get elected. If we remember, we need to pull troops out, we need to leave the whole Middle East, and next you have this coming. So it is the industrial complex, the deep state, who's behind this to escalate, to help Trump. They brought him probably a re-election for sure if he can start something like this. Same thing with Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, in occupied Palestine. He's facing the same exact heat the U.S. Trump is. So we need to understand that war always pleases the money makers of the world. War always helps the U.S. industrial military complex to grow and to continue to be able to continue to build weapons. Because if you can't use the weapons you currently are building, how are you going to build further weapons? Same thing like with any industry. If you don't move what you have, how can you build? If you don't sell the 2019 Toyotas, how can you manufacture 2020? You've got to always find hot spots around the world to be able to continually sell those weapons. Simple math, simple logic. The biggest industry in the world is not car manufacturing, it's weapon manufacturing. It's not oil, it's weapons. So nobody talks about it, of course, but the U.S. profits hugely from wars. So for them to make this catastrophic, in my opinion, it's not going to be played down by Iraq or by Iran. What happened on last Sunday, the assassination of 27 people, yes, that could have been played down. You know, about 500 Iraqis, angry Iraqis from the Popular Mobilization Forces did enter the green zone, set fire to the doors of the embassy, justified after killing 27 of their comrades with no reason. But the Popular Mobilization Forces did order a step down for the guys. They said, okay, you've done enough. Your message was clearly sent to the U.S. We want you out. So there was no escalation or threat of imminent war, even though there are 27 people who lost their life for no reason. The wrong attack. You're not attacking the ISIS. You're attacking the people who fought unexplained, but it would have been probably not ignited. Come back 3 days later and make that other attack, taking another general and the leaders of that level. That's just not going to go unanswered. Iran and Iraq will answer in one way or another.
What is immediate at this time?
I would say, at least for Iraq, this would be definitely the beginning of the end of the American occupying forces in Iraq. Iraq's parliament will pass a resolution very, very soon to ask the American contractors, the American mercenaries. It's just not just the American military there. There is a lot of other contractors, subcontractors, and mercenaries are working in Iraq. So there's tens of thousands of American presence in Iraq. I believe it is that this crime and this assassination will be the beginning of the end of the American presence in Iraq and the region. That's one statement for sure. Now, Iraq is in the eye of the storm because you got Washington extreme pressure campaign on Tehran through Iraq, and you got also the response of Iran on the Iraqi military as well. So Iraq is somehow a partner of both, and U.S. expects Baghdad to resist Iran, and Iran expects Baghdad to resist the U.S., an almost impossible position for Iraq. So Iraq since 2003 has not come out. Since the U.S. occupation, the U.S. remained fully responsible for all the political chaos and economic downfalls in Iraq until today. And just about when maybe there was finally a way out and a peace after the defeating of ISIS, this started all over again. It is something that for intelligent audience to listen carefully to what we're saying here. The U.S. does not want to end the war in the Middle East, does not want to pull out its forces. Even though they talk about it for years and years, the action is always the opposite of that rhetoric. So God help us all if that happens, my dear, because I honestly do not wish it. I wish there will be some stand down. I don't want to see a region engulfed in war again, which means the U.S. is going to be sending troops in the tens of thousands, if not in the 100,000. Actually, troops right now are standing by in Kuwait trying to enter Iraq. We're back to square one. We're back to 2001 after the attack on the World Trade Center, which was done by, again, I want to remind listeners, 19 Saudi citizens, not Iraqis, not Syrians, not Libyans, Saudi, the state that promotes Wahhabism, which is the ideology for Al-Qaeda, the ideology for ISIS, the ideology for Al-Nusra. It's a missionary state. Saudi Arabia is the missionary state for this terroristic ideology around the world. Who do we attack? We attack Iran. Oh, Afghanistan, and then Iraq. Why Iraq? Because we could, because we don't like that president, who, by the way, was anti-Al-Qaeda. He was a secular leader, just like Bashar al-Assad is. Secular leaders, anti-Al-Qaeda, anti-religious extremism. But no, instead we go into Iraq, we destroy this country, we kill 1.5 million, all just for war, all for oil and wars. So we're going to be going out on a big rally tomorrow, Saturday, in Pershing Square. It's the Answer Coalition, and also with many other coalitions are calling for a nationwide strike all over the United States to try and deter the U.S. from acting foolish and taking us into another decade of wars in the Middle East.
And so, once again, the protest is happening at Pershing Square in downtown LA. It's off the Metro Red Line. If you are taking public transportation, it starts at 1 p.m. It is a nationwide protest. It is put on by Answer Coalition, as well as many other coalitions nationwide in solidarity. And so you are tuned in to Freedom Now,
and we are speaking with our brother Johnny Achi with Arab Americans for Syria.
Iran has not been the aggressors here. I need to confirm this. Iran has never occupied any neighboring country like Turkey does or Israel does. Iran is just saying, and yes, they have an influence in Iraq right now. They are neighbors. I mean, if the United States allows, let's say Russia, enters Mexico play and start to play with the Mexican minds and politics, does that suit U.S. fine? It would not. So Iran is a natural neighbor of Iraq. Yes, they are involved in their policies to make sure that ISIS does not return, Al-Qaeda does not return, and that is something a neighbor does to a neighbor. So that's not occupying. The U.S. is the occupying forces, and it's time for them to leave. So we need to make sure that if Iran retaliates, and I believe they will retaliate, I hope it would be nothing of a grave scale, something that would not force us all to go into another. I mean, enough. The Middle East has had it. Libya had it. Iraq had it. Syria had it. Time for calm to come back. And we were hoping that 2020 was going to bring calm to the Middle East, but unfortunately it was not to be. I think Trump's resolution was the opposite.
Brother Johnny, can you talk to our listeners about the OPCW scandal?
Oh, yes. Okay, about the OPCW, for people, the OPCW is the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW. I got to go back, if we still have time, just briefly to 2013 when I was in Damascus. I was in Damascus to welcome the UN team that was coming actually to investigate an al-Assad attack in Aleppo in 2013. It happened in March of 2013. It took us about 4 or 5 months to convince the OPCW or the United Nations to send a team to investigate what at that time the Syrian government requested, because attack was against the Syrian army, and that was the very first attack of any gases or chemical agents in Syria. On the eve of the arrival of the United Nations, finally, on August 21st, they arrived in the morning. August 20th, they arrived at night. I was there in Damascus. On August 21st, that morning, another attack happened in eastern Ghouta. Of course, we all know what happened. The whole world blamed the Syrian government. The Syrian government, who asked the United Nations to come in to investigate an attack against its army, is going to wait till the eve of the arrival of that United Nations team to attack Syrian in a small area near Damascus, not even 5 kilometers from Damascus. The logic does not make sense. The Syrian army was advancing at the time, did not need to use any weapons. They were not even using, I was telling you earlier, we were not using conventional weapons when we know that there's a lot of civilians, let alone to use chemicals. Besides the point, the whole world at the time, if you remember, when crazy wanted to attack Syria, just like what I think a pretext to mention right now, or a war in Iran is going to probably take place. Luckily, we saved Syria. Major demonstration happened all over the U.S. Literally millions of calls and emails were sent to U.S. Congress to vote down a war against Syria, mainly because there was no proof of anything. It was just all, and finally the finding of Cara del Ponte, who was an independent investigator for the United Nations, said it was most likely that the terrorists themselves who planted that, not the Syrian army. A Syrian army chemical weapon would take 1,000, not a couple of hundred people. I'm just reminding you back in 2013, my position has always been the Syrian army never used, doesn't have chemical weapons, doesn't need to use chemical weapons. Someone who's winning a war does not. If he was defeated, maybe if someone was as crazy as some chaotic person would do, is throw a last nuclear bomb or a chemical bomb and kill everybody before he's gone. That's not the case in Syria. Syria has been from the beginning of this war, the Syrian army has been very patient, because Syria has been around for a long time. It was invaded many times, but it will always raised from the ashes. We have a civilization of 10,000 years old. Every civilian Syrian knows how important to not have chaos. We've seen neighbors, we've seen people around us. Everybody was supporting the Syrian army because we wanted order. We wanted normalcy in Syria. So no one ever in Syria believed that the Syrian army would ever use chemical weapons against its own people, because the Syrian army is made out of the people. We forward to 2018 on that Duma attack. Again, another pretext. They've been trying to do pretext after pretext, and the Syrian army, meanwhile, gaining more ground and ending the war in Syria. So the final founding of the APCW was refuted by not one whistleblower, 2 whistleblowers. Again, 2 whistleblowers, that the OPCW actually suppressed evidence of its own scientist research, okay? There was OPCW emails and documents that were leaked. Whistleblowers came forward, spoke to journalists and international lawyers. One back in May, who clearly said that the canister, the main chlorine cylinder that was found in Duma, and I think the images, everybody remember those, that this cylinder, this huge cylinder, could not have been dropped by air, that it was clearly placed there as basically staged. So it was manually placed there, not at all dropped by air. So that was back in May. Everybody suppressed that. This never made it as a news. However, the second whistleblower that just came out in Brussels, a big news conference, he was more detailed. He talked about the U.S. pressure on the OPCW management. He talked about how they were told, you need to make it look as if the Syrian government has been responsible for this alleged chemical incident. They were actually present in their meeting. So when they were meeting the OPCW, the U.S. was present, trying to pressure them into agreeing or saying that. And of course, that is against OPCW impartiality. You cannot have someone who's part of this conflict be present and telling you what to do. That second whistleblower put the icing on the cake, and mainly his name, Alex, I think is not a real name, but the journalist who interviewed him, actually Jonathan Steve, who's a very well-known journalist who used to write for The Guardian, he's the one who actually met with those whistleblowers prior for them to having that. He said the elephant in the room, which no one dared mention explicitly, that there is no chemical attack occurred. So everybody in the OPCW and that investigating team thought and wanted to say it, but could not say it. There was heavy pressure by the U.S. This otherwise would have made world news. If it was the opposite story, it would have been headlined more than even the impeachment. But of course, when it's the U.S. being accused of pretext of war and staging war and intervention for regime change, it does not suit its fine. You never hear about it or talk about it. So I'm glad we got a chance, even briefly, but you can read about it. Just look at the OPCW scandals, and there's all the points that scientifically make a tremendous sense that this was not a bomb. It was staged by the terrorists, like they did in Ghouta in 2013, just like they did in Aleppo prior month in 2013. And I've been saying it all along. I was present in Damascus at that month. I came back here. We brought into Damascus a big delegation of the U.S. delegation to stop the war in Syria in August and actually in September with the late Idan Kamathi, who I had the pleasure of being on his show right now, Sister Stage, for many, many years. He was with us in Damascus with Ramsey Clark, the ex-Attorney General, with Her Excellency Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, of course, and many other delegate members. They came to Syria, they interviewed people, they spoke with different people, and they realized that it was not the Syrian army who would commit such a huge crime. But again, you do not kill 100 or 200 people. If you were to use a chemical weapon, you'll take out thousands and tens of thousands. But it was an evident pretext for intervention. Luckily, the U.S. backed down, and because the U.S. Congress realized evidence were leaking that it was a pretext for intervention, and that was the terrorists themselves who staged it. I hope finally that the people in the United States are finally listening to the sound of logic, listening not to the propaganda machine of CNN, trying to think for themselves. Syrian army is not killing people. Syrian President Bashar Assad is the defender of a nation. He could have fled long time ago, but he knew he has a responsibility. He doesn't want to turn Syria to Iraq or Libya. He's seen what happened there. We stuck together and we won together, and for the very first time, the U.S. industrial military complex and the deep state has been defeated for the very first time by a very small but very resistant nation called Syria.
Thank you so much, Brother Johnny. Again, we've been speaking with Brother Johnny Achi with Arab Americans for Syria. So we look forward to an update on the situation in the region.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me.